Hello world, my name is Maddie and welcome to my first video assignment for the CS50 Introduction to Game Development course. In this first video, we will be looking at my solution for Assignment 0, Pong, the AI update. In this first lecture, we were introduced to a version of the classic game Pong, coded in Lua using the Love 2D framework. This version of the game allows two players to play against each other using the WS and up-down keys. However, if, like me, you end up playing against yourself most of the time,
yay, I win again.
The game can get a little tedious. Fortunately, the brief for this assignment was to implement AI functionality for one or both players. My initial thoughts were to move the paddles up or down based on whether the ball's position was above or below the paddle. One of the advantages to this approach is that since the ball is already confined within the top and bottom of the screen, the AI paddles will also remain within those bounds. After adding this functionality to both paddles, I added a variable called isAI to the paddle class. This is to control whether the paddle responded to player controls or used the AI behavior. Setting both paddles to be AI in the main file, I let the game run and it looked a bit like this. So, job done, right? Well, not quite. Although this solution does technically meet the requirements, I think we can do a bit better. So, what needs improving? First of all, it's a bit of a pain to have to go into the code every time I want to change which player is an AI. So let's add a menu in-game to do that. Next, the paddles are behaving very robotically. This is especially obvious when they're playing against each other, as they have this mirroring effect. Surely we can make them mimic human behavior a bit better. Let's alter the paddle behavior so they act a bit more like a real person. Finally, let's add a requirement that the AI must be beatable. It may not be fun to play against myself, given how bad I am at this game, but equally it's no fun to play against an opponent that cannot be beaten. Okay, let's try this again. This new version of the game has an additional game state called Setup, during which players choose whether the paddles are players or AI. Only once both player roles have been chosen does the game proceed to the start game state. I also added functionality to the backspace key, which allows players to return to the setup game state at any time. As for the AI functionality, I changed the paddle behavior to only respond to the ball if it was moving towards the paddle and had crossed a third of the screen. This prevented the mirroring effect of the previous implementation and introduced a delay that mimicked human response time. However, I quickly identified an issue with this implementation. As the ball's velocity increases over the match, the time it takes for the ball to cross a third of the screen decreases. This effectively causes the paddle's reaction time to decrease as the ball gets faster. Obviously, this is not how a human would respond. To maintain a consistent reaction time, I first calculated roughly how long the ball would take to cross a third of the screen at its initial velocity. From this, I was able to calculate what the X position of the ball would be after the same time period on each rebound, using a fraction of the ball's current velocity. This way, the paddle response time remains consistent without having to use any kind of timer functionality. So, now we have a player selection screen and an AI that behaves more like a person. But what about the final criteria? Is it beatable? Well, certainly not by me. I decided to bring in a playtester to give it a try.
Yes!
And there you have it. If you'd like to try this implementation of the game for yourself, you can find the link to the code repository in the description below. All the code and sounds of the original game were provided by the CS50 team, and I've also added some links to some resources on Lua and Love 2D, just in case you fancy giving them a try yourself. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye for now.
Yeah. Oh, I pressed the wrong one!
You think you can beat it?
I'm going again.